Story 1. The Craigslist Honeypot. It all started with a single Craigslist ad, buried among the noise of apartment rentals, used furniture, and odd jobs. The post was simple, almost too simple, and that's what caught my attention. Looking for something casual, just got out of a relationship and don't want anything serious. Message me if you're interested. No flowery language, no unnecessary details, just a straight to the point offer from someone who seemed genuinely interested in a low pressure connection. Attached was a photo. She was stunning, blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that exuded warmth and approachability. She looked like someone who didn't need Craigslist to find a date. Which should have been my first red flag, but instead of questioning it, I was flattered. Why would someone like her choose me? I convinced myself it was fate. Taking a deep breath, I typed out a response, careful to strike the right balance of confidence and humor. To my surprise, she replied almost immediately. Her name was Sarah, and she had just gone through a messy breakup. She wasn't looking for anything serious, just some fun to distract her from the pain. It sounded believable. We exchanged messages throughout the day, and it didn't take long for the conversation to heat up. She sent a few more pictures, each one more provocative than the last, and I was hooked. She even suggested meeting up that evening. Her casual attitude and the way she seemed genuinely interested in me overrode any lingering doubts I had. Is this real? I finally asked, half jokingly, hoping to mask my insecurity. She replied with a photo of herself holding a piece of paper with my name scrawled across it. The proof was undeniable. She gave me an address in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It sounded perfect, neutral territory where we could meet without the pressure of a public bar or restaurant. I could tell she had done this before because she made it sound so natural. So ordinary. That night, I pulled up to the address she provided. The house was modest but well kept, with a neatly trimmed lawn and a porch light glowing warmly in the twilight. For a moment, I felt my nerves subside. It looked like the kind of place where someone like Sarah would live. I called her to let her know I'd arrived, but she didn't answer. I tried again, still nothing. A flicker of doubt crept in, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was getting ready and didn't have her phone on her. As I stepped out of my car and approached the house, a shadow shifted behind one of the windows. I stopped in my tracks. 2 men were standing there, partially obscured by the curtains. They were watching me. The first man was burly, with a shaved head and a permanent scowl etched across his face. The second was wiry, with tattoos snaking up his arms and a jittery demeanor that set me on edge. They didn't move or say anything, just stared. Every hair on the back of my neck stood on end. Something wasn't right. My first instinct was to turn around and leave, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. Maybe they were roommates, friends of hers. I tried to rationalize the situation, but deep down, I knew better. The way they looked at me wasn't casual or curious. It was predatory. I forced myself to move. Taking a step back toward my car, the front door opened, and my heart nearly stopped. A man stepped out, not Sarah, but a third guy the first hadn't seen before. He was older, with a grizzled beard and cold eyes that gave nothing away. He stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, and smiled faintly, as if amused by my hesitation. "You here for Sarah?" he asked. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. "She's inside," he said, gesturing toward the open door. Something about the way he said it, calm, detached, almost rehearsed, made my stomach churn. This wasn't right. None of it was right. I think I might have the wrong house," I stammered, taking another step back. The man's smile faltered for a split second before returning. "No, you've got the right place. Come on in." My instinct screamed at me to run. I mumbled an excuse about forgetting something in my car and turned on my heel. As I reached my car door, I heard the man call out, his tone light but laced with something sinister. "Leaving already? Thought you were here for some fun." I didn't respond. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. In my rearview mirror, I saw the man still standing on the porch, watching as I sped away. The 2 men from the window were now outside as well, their silhouettes barely visible in the dim light. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the encounter, dissecting every detail and imagining every possible outcome if I'd gone inside. By morning, I had convinced myself that I'd overreacted. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Sarah was real, and those men were just her friends or family. 2 days later, the news proved me wrong. The headline read, "Man attacked in Craigslist setup." The story detailed how a man had responded to an ad eerily similar to Sarah's. When he arrived at the same house I had visited, he wasn't so lucky. The 3 men ambushed him as soon as he stepped inside. They beat him, robbed him, and left him unconscious. The victim was discovered hours later by a neighbor who heard groaning from inside the house. He was rushed to the hospital, barely clinging to life. My blood ran cold as I read the article. The description of the house and the neighborhood matched perfectly. The realization hit me like a freight train. If I hadn't trusted my instincts and fled, I could have been that man. The experience left me shaken. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about how close I'd come to being their victim. The ad wasn't just a prank or a scam, it was a calculated trap, designed to lure unsuspecting men into a nightmare. Even now, years later, I can't look at Craigslist without feeling a pang of unease. The platform is a breeding ground for anonymity, and with anonymity comes danger. Behind every ad, there's a person, and you can never truly know their intentions. Sometimes, I wonder how many other men fell for the same trap. How many weren't as lucky as I was? Craigslist is a strange and dangerous place, full of hidden horrors and anonymous predators. Sometimes, the danger is overt, like a house full of men waiting to ambush you. Other times, it's subtle, a cryptic message or an email exchange that seems harmless at first. And yet, curiosity always gets the better of us. That's what happened to me the day I stumbled across the ad with 3 chilling words: "I see you." Story 2. The "I see you" text. Craigslist has always been a place of curiosity, a strange, chaotic corner of the internet where people sell old furniture, trade odd jobs, and occasionally post things so bizarre that you wonder if they're even real. I was no stranger to its quirks. In fact, I often browsed Craigslist for entertainment, scrolling through listings for haunted dolls or laughably bad attempts at dating ads. It was a harmless habit, or so I thought, the day I stumbled upon the "I see you" ad. It felt like any other. I had just wrapped up work, craving something mindless to distract me. Scrolling through the gigs section, I came across the post: "Earn $100 by sending a text." Totally legit. Serious inquiries only. That was it. No details. No further explanation. Just a single, vague promise of easy money. At first, I scoffed. Another Craigslist scam, I thought, but something about the ad intrigued me. Maybe it was the sheer simplicity of it, the lack of any context. It was like a mystery begging to be solved. I couldn't help myself. I clicked on it. The full post didn't add much. It reiterated the promise of $100 and provided an email address: quickcashtext@gmail.com. Something about the name struck me as lazy, almost amateurish, which only made the ad feel more authentic. Scammers usually tried harder to sound convincing, right? Still, I wasn't naive. I assumed this was some phishing scheme or a bait-and-switch tactic. But the curiosity gnawed at me. Against my better judgment, I sent a quick email. "Hi, I saw your ad. Can you tell me more about the job?" The reply came almost immediately, which was the first thing that set me on edge. "Thanks for reaching out. The task is simple. I'll provide you with a phone number and a short message to send. Once the message is delivered, I'll wire $100 to your account." It's as easy as that. There was no name, no signature, just the instructions. I reread the email, searching for any clues about the sender. The tone was cold and professional, devoid of any personality. It felt hollow. Still, I was hooked. I needed to know more. "What's the message?" I replied. The second reply took longer, as if the sender had taken time to deliberate. When it came, the answer was chillingly simple. "I see you." I stared at the screen, the 3 words practically glaring back at me. My mind raced with questions. Who was this message for? What purpose could it possibly serve? On its own, it wasn't threatening, just ambiguous. But that ambiguity made it worse. I typed out another email, trying to keep my tone casual. "Who's the recipient?" This time, the response was curt. "That's not your concern. Just send the message, and you'll get paid." A chill ran down my spine. Something about the insistence on anonymity felt wrong. Why would someone go to such lengths to avoid sending their own text? The whole thing reeked of something dark, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "What if I say no?" I replied, half expecting no response. But they did respond, and it came faster than ever. "Then I'll find someone else." That line hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't a threat, not overtly, but it felt like one. I debated ending the correspondence there, but part of me was desperate to understand what this was. I wrote one last message: "Why can't you send the message yourself?" The reply was immediate and chilling in its simplicity: "I prefer to remain anonymous." That was it. That was all they said. After that, I didn't reply. I flagged the ad on Craigslist and deleted the email thread. For the rest of the evening, I tried to forget about it, convincing myself it was just another scam. But the next day, curiosity got the better of me, and I returned to Craigslist to check on the ad. It was gone. At first, I felt relieved. Craigslist moderators must have removed it, I told myself, but something about its absence felt off. Craigslist wasn't known for its swift moderation. Ads stayed up for weeks, sometimes months, even when flagged multiple times. What if the ad wasn't taken down by moderators? What if someone had actually responded, taken the job, and sent the message? The thought made my skin crawl. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with possibilities. Who was the recipient of the text? What would they think or do when they saw it? Maybe it was just a prank, a cruel joke to unnerve someone. Or maybe it was something more sinister, a signal, a warning, or even a threat. I imagined the worst-case scenarios. A stalker using the message to terrify their victim. A criminal marking their next target. The possibilities were endless, each more unsettling than the last. A few days later, I stumbled upon an online forum dedicated to Craigslist horror stories. One thread caught my eye. Weird ad, earn $100 to send a text. The post was written by someone who had responded to an ad almost identical to the one I had seen. According to the poster, they'd taken the job out of curiosity. The process was exactly as described. They received a phone number, sent the text, and were promptly paid. But then things took a dark turn. The poster described receiving strange calls in the middle of the night, calls where no one spoke. But they could hear faint breathing on the other end. They also claimed to have seen a shadowy figure outside their house, watching from a distance. The thread exploded with comments, some accusing the poster of fabricating the story, others sharing similar experiences. One person claimed that after sending the text, they'd been followed for weeks by an unknown car. Another said they'd received threatening messages, warning them to mind their own business. Reading these accounts made my blood run cold. I thought about how close I'd come to taking the job, how easily I could have been in their position. To this day, I don't know what the "I see you" text was really about. Was it a prank, a scam, or something far more sinister? What haunts me the most is the possibility that someone acted on it. Someone sent that text, and somewhere out there, the recipient read those 3 words, "I see you." What happened after that? Did it end with a simple laugh? Or did it spiral into something darker? I'll never know, and maybe that's for the best. But every now and then, when I'm up late at night and the house is quiet, I find myself staring out the window, half expecting to see someone standing in the shadows, watching. Craigslist is a strange and unpredictable place, where the line between the mundane and the macabre blurs far too easily. Sometimes, the danger comes in the form of a cryptic text message. Other times, it wears a more familiar guise. Story 3. The Lost Dog and the Trap. Oscar wasn't just a pet, he was family. A tiny Jack Russell Terrier with more energy than seemed physically possible. He came into our lives as a bundle of fur and chaos. We had adopted him early in our relationship, seeing him as a trial run for parenthood, at least. That was the joke we told our friends. But Oscar was more than that. He was a companion, a source of constant joy, and, at times, a tiny, furry tornado that turned our lives upside down. He had one quirk, though: his obsession with the rats that lived near the dumpsters behind our apartment building. Being a terrier, Oscar was hardwired for the hunt, and the scent of those rats sent him into a frenzy. He'd bark furiously, tug at his leash, and do everything in his power to chase him down. It got so bad that we stopped taking him out back, worried he'd escape and bolt across the busy street nearby. That's why the morning we woke up to find the back door open and Oscar gone was nothing short of devastating. My boyfriend had come home late the night before, a little drunk, and hadn't latched the door properly. At some point during the night, Oscar must have sniffed out his chance, whether he'd found a gap in the fence or leapt over it in his pursuit of rats. We didn't know. All we knew was that he was gone. The moment we realized he was missing, we were out the door, calling his name and scouring the neighborhood. We checked the park, the alleys, the nearby yards, everywhere we thought a curious little dog might go. I printed out flyers, plastering them on telephone poles and slipping them into mailboxes. My boyfriend knocked on doors, asking our neighbors if they'd seen him. The hours turned into a day, then 2. Every time my phone buzzed, I held my breath, hoping it was someone calling to say they'd found him. But the phone stayed stubbornly silent. On the 3rd day, my boyfriend suggested posting an ad on Craigslist. People use it for lost pets all the time, he said. I was skeptical, but at this point, I was willing to try anything. The ad was simple. Oscar is a small Jack Russell Terrier, white with brown spots, last seen near our address. He's very friendly and answers to his name. If you've seen him or found him, please contact us immediately. $200 reward for his safe return. I attached a picture of Oscar, his bright eyes and perky ears practically begging the viewer to help us. Hitting post felt like sending a message in a bottle out into the vast, unpredictable sea of the internet. The response came 2 days later. Hi, I found a small dog wandering near the highway a couple of nights ago. My friend saw your Craigslist post and sent me the link. I'm pretty sure it's your dog. He even responds to the name Oscar. Please call me at phone number so we can arrange to return him. I read the email aloud to my boyfriend, barely able to contain my excitement. Could it really be that easy? I dialed the number immediately. The man who answered sounded older, with a gravelly voice and an unhurried way of speaking. He told me he'd found Oscar by the side of the road. Looking frightened but unharmed, he'd brought him home, fed him some cooked chicken, and made a leash out of rope to take him for walks. He's a sweet little guy, the man said, but I figured someone must be missing him. My friend saw your ad and told me about it. Tears of relief welled up in my eyes. I couldn't believe it. Oscar was safe. The man gave us his address and told us we could come by that evening to pick him up. I thanked him profusely, barely able to get the words out through my overwhelming gratitude. But something he said at the end of the call gave me pause. He's in my basement, the man added. Just so you know, I mentioned it to my boyfriend after I hung up. Why would he keep him in the basement? Maybe he's worried about messes, I said, trying to reassure myself. Oscar isn't exactly house-trained. But my boyfriend didn't seem convinced. If he's taking him on walks, why keep him downstairs? And did you notice the address? That's not a great part of town. He wasn't wrong. The neighborhood the man had described was notorious for its run-down houses and crime. Still, I couldn't imagine someone going to the trouble of luring us out there just for a scam, or worse. I wanted to believe the man was just eccentric but well-meaning. Even so, my boyfriend insisted on coming with me. The sun was setting as we drove to the address. The streets became increasingly desolate. The houses more and more run down. Many of them had boarded-up windows or yards overgrown with weeds. By the time we reached the house, I was starting to feel a knot of unease in my stomach. The house was in bad shape. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged under its own weight, and the yard was a tangle of knee-high grass and trash. A single light bulb above the door flickered faintly, casting eerie shadows across the facade. A man stood in the doorway, waving at us. He looked ordinary enough, mid-40s, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, but something about him felt off. His smile was too wide, too forced. "You must be here for Oscar," he said, his voice gruff but friendly. "Come on in, he's downstairs." The smell hit me as we stepped onto the porch, damp air mixed with something faintly metallic. My boyfriend hesitated, his hand brushing mine. "Can you bring him up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man's smile faltered for a split second before returning. "It's easier if you just come in," he said. I glanced at my boyfriend, who gave me a subtle shake of his head. "We'll wait out here," my boyfriend said firmly. The man's demeanor shifted, his eyes grew colder, and his tone lost its friendliness. "Suit yourself," he said, disappearing back into the house. Minutes passed. We stood on the porch, the silence stretching uncomfortably. My boyfriend checked his watch, his jaw tight. "We're leaving," he whispered. Just as we turned to go, the man reappeared in the doorway. His face was blank now, his eyes hard. "Not coming in after all?" he asked flatly. "No," my boyfriend replied, steering me toward the car. The man said nothing as we got in the car and drove away. But I could feel his eyes on us until we turned the corner. When we got home, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd narrowly avoided something terrible. The next morning, I searched the address online. The house had been foreclosed 3 years ago. It wasn't supposed to be occupied. My stomach dropped. I called the police, reporting the incident and the address. A week later, an officer called me back, his tone grave. They'd investigated the house and found something, though he wouldn't tell me what. All he said was, "You're lucky you didn't go inside." We never found Oscar. The guilt of leaving him behind still eats at me, but so does the fear of what might have happened if we'd stepped through that door. Craigslist is a strange and dangerous place, where the line between help and harm is often blurred. Sometimes, desperation drives us to trust strangers. Other times, it's the lure of a deal too good to be true. I don't think I've opened Craigslist since that night. The thought of it still makes my stomach turn. But what about you? Have you ever come across a suspicious post or found yourself in a situation that made your skin crawl? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And hey, if you enjoyed this story and want more tales of horror, mystery, and the unexplainable, make sure to like this video, share it with your fellow horror lovers, and subscribe to Wolf Tells. You never know what kind of nightmare we'll uncover next. Until next time, stay safe out there.